That's cool. So it links straight up to YouTube, eh?
Yeah, it's almost done. It's redirecting, and I think we're already live. Okay.
Brilliant.
So welcome to another program of our Gray Lounge meetups, where we meet friends and family members of our Gray Lounge from all over the world. And tonight, or rather evening in UK, we bring to you one of our very known personalities. Our TGL members already know about Nick Grove. And but tonight, Mr. Grove will first introduce himself about his journey so far in his life, what he has learned from all his experiences all over the world, and through his exposure to life. And then I would touch some topics of his interest and see what he has to say about them. So welcome, Nick, and if you could introduce yourself to our members, and then we will continue with that.
Thank you, my brother. Nice to be here, finally, and have a good chat. Hi, everybody. I'm Nick. I'll give you a little bit of background about me. So, for many years, I've been caught between, let's say, spiritual and technical and many aspects of life. My spiritual journey, I suppose, I come from a typical British, Christian background, I suppose. We didn't go to church. Parents weren't really religious, but they were quite open. Now, growing up in the UK through the 80s and the 90s as well, and understanding the world, it's a big world, but there's a lot of xenophobia in the world. And that can come across through lots of different aspects. And obviously then going to university, meeting lots of different nationalities and different people, and really understanding that, I think that was part of my real journey, which was understanding that actually race, religion, creed, color, where you live, what you do, means really nothing about connecting with somebody, right? There's many people, I've had the best times of my life with people I cannot speak a word in their natural language to. They can't speak English, I couldn't speak maybe Italian or French or whatever it might be, right? You can get away with hand signals. It's about your intent and the energy you want to put out. So university really opened me up. And then, through my journey, my mum was very spiritual, although she wasn't really necessarily exploring it as much. And I remember I didn't really understand, but one of her best friends when growing up was chairwoman of the British Psychic and Astrological Society. And she was very much into, doing readings and healings and other bits and pieces. And I suppose probably in my early 20s, started having very big questions about different things. And the questions were really open, because for me, things like just looking at the Bible, not that I've ever really read spiritual texts all the way through. I absorb things and I can instantly get the essence of things to a degree. But there were many questions in it for me, which is, the difference between the written text and reality and somebody's storytelling and what it actually means and how we do that. So for me, it was a long journey, and I think probably one of the seminal moments in that journey. And over the years, I've done quite a lot of things. So as a business, at university I did civil engineering. So as an engineer, and even as a kid, I've always liked making things and building things. But I got out of that and I started building websites. And effectively, as we were doing that, I was outsourcing to India. So when I went to India, I got into doing some healing and traveling up to the Himalayas and, around India with lots of good Indian friends, right, as a local. And through living in the UK and my mum's friend, my girlfriend at the time, her mum got breast cancer. So she wanted to go and do the Inca Trail in Peru. And all of these things, I might jump around a bit, but hopefully you get the essence. So we got introduced to some shaman in Peru. And as part of the journey, one of the big things about these journeys when people go and raise money and do these walks, we both felt that, doing it organized where effectively you're taking contributions from people to pay for your holiday wasn't right. So we organized our whole trip. We videoed it. She was on QVC at the time, so we did a whole presentation. But once we'd finished our journey doing the Inca Trail, we ended up traveling with 10 shaman for about 10 days. We went down to La Paz and we went up through Machu Picchu. And the guy we traveled with took, or still does, I think he used to take all of the solstice ceremonies at Machu Picchu. So he did the summer and the winter solstice. And, you know, we ended up in there at like 5 a.m. as the only people in Machu Picchu. And some of the experiences were, you know, out of the world. In Peru, there's many different sort of, you know, very spiritual sites, dimensional doorways, other bits and pieces. And there were some really big experiences for me personally in Machu Picchu as well. It's kind of that, you know, that bit in your heart. So one of the things, and there's a few things that come up today, and we can bring back to this later, but with shaman, and particularly in Peru, there's something medicine plants that they take, ayahuasca being one of them. And these days, I think it's probably more people are aware of it. It's maybe getting a little bit abused in terms of how people are doing it. But we were with 10 shaman. We were with the shaman of Aguas Calientes, which is where Machu Picchu is. And we did a journey, and it's an amazing journey, because on a spiritual level, they say that you get the journey that you need. Okay. And I remember coming around at the time, and you either take it, you're supposed to be sick, you're purging, but it's a long journey. And it was the first time I really was aware of it. When we're in the journey, it was like you get in, and I was consciously aware of leaving my body. Okay, so you know when you're conscious and you can feel your heart and your lungs and everything else. I was aware of actually consciously leaving my body, the separation, and having no physical relationship to my breathing. Right? So I've got no understanding of my breathing. And this is what I call my Martini moment. Right? Martini in the UK is like the drink, the vermouth sort of drink, right? So in the 80s, there used to be a Martini advert, and the strapline was anytime, any place, anywhere. That's Martini, right? So for me, what happened was, as I went out of body, and bearing in mind having, you know, traveled and done healing in different countries and worked with.
Was there a person performing this OBE upon you, or were you doing it on your own?
No, we were with. So it was a ceremony. So we had the shaman of Aguas Calientes, we had the shaman that we were traveling with, and then there were about 6 or 8 other shaman with us also journeying at the time. So it was, you know, it was in Peru. We were on the middle of this floor. It was a spiritual journey. It was with the right essence, the right people. You know, we'd been traveling together for 10 days. So yes,
and
it was.
And had they told all of you that you would be now experiencing an out-of-body experience, or was it that it?
No, because all they say is that with ayahuasca you get, and having known more about it, you get the journey that you need. Every journey is individual to the person, right?
Everybody was having a different journey.
Yeah, everybody, and I think this is where it starts to get into the understanding consciousness and other realms, and those realms that may interact with us or come into us. Now, they're either external to us or they are internal to us. But ultimately, and this, I think, is where there is a real unknown. Right? There's a lot of people doing a lot of work, but I think we just have to take some of it as is, that we live in a universe which is far bigger, far more expansive, far more going on than we can comprehend, we know about, or we even believe could happen, right? So as an out-of-body experience, and in my journey of, let's say, spirituality and healing and other elements, I've got to learn more and more about out-of-body experiences, and particularly one of them from growing up as a kid, the amount of times I went to sleep and, you know, in your dream state, falling, and then waking up before you hit the ground or what have you, and then learning that actually that was your consciousness coming back into your body, right, in your sleep state once you're there. And then depending on where you've been and some of those journeys can depend on the amount of energy you wake up with, right? Because sometimes you wake up more tired than you went to bed because of the activity that you've had in your dream phase. Now, that isn't a dream in the true sense, because it's been very well measured and there's a lot more to this. So going back to the journey, it was very, I didn't know what to expect, all right? And I didn't know that it would be a conscious out of body journey. And actually my girlfriend at the time, actually, I don't think we've really properly had a good catch up on this journey about what she got. I remember the shaman saying to her, new baby. And I thought at the time she was pregnant, but effectively he was saying that she was going to be reborn. For me, when I became consciously aware, I was very aware of, some of the great spiritual masters, like Yogananda, for example. There's stories in the about Yogananda being able to project to other parts of India and then appear as almost like as a physical being in front of people, right? And I'm sure that happens in many texts anyway. So the feeling that I got was, and this was also a very interesting point as well, because when you get into the spiritual side, there's a whole bit about are you going to the light or are you going to the dark, right? And all I can remember was darkness, so there was no light. So it wasn't about light or dark, it was about consciousness, right? So there's another conversation in that, because obviously you can't have one without the other, right? There is light and dark, and that includes our shadow side and all of the other aspects that we have to deal with, and particularly everything else that's going on in the world, right? And the avoidance or the ignorance of one over the other is what also creates problems, right? But it's not an easy journey. It takes work, it takes effort. So for me, when I became, it was a moment where I really was aware of leaving my body. And at that point, I realized I could be anything, anytime, any place, anywhere, because there was no physicality, right? I was just a consciousness. As my consciousness, I had awareness of me existing on a completely other level. Now, what I actually got was, it wasn't that I could be anything, anytime, any place, anywhere. It was that I was everything. Every time, every place, everywhere. And that is pervasive, right? And coming from a position really of also understanding, or not just understanding, but a curiosity as well in terms of physics, quantum physics, and other things that are happening in the world, it really got me into thinking about, what does that mean? What does that mean that that feeling that I could be anything, anytime, any place, anywhere? And the way I could describe it is that, there's a lot of discussion, right? If there's a Big Bang Theory, if we're an expanding universe, or if this or that. I think that, and I've had discussions recently about mixed messages in spirituality, right? Over consciousness and an absolute reality. I don't believe that they are separate. I think they're intrinsically one. We don't know anyway, because we've never experienced one without the other. But to me, it was very much, if you think of it as energy, right? Energy in physics is never lost, it's transferred, right? And then when you get into space-time, three-dimensional reality is about time, right? Time creates three-dimensional reality, and that's the physical. So if we take all that away, ultimately, it's just energy, right? Now, if energy is never lost, it's just transferred. It's about the frequency and the vibration of that energy. But ultimately, it isn't separate. It's just a wavelength, right? And if you start off a wave over here, you can have one wave like this, and it can change over there. Now, you only have to look at that, what's the way to picture this? Imagine if you've got a TV show and they've got like an ER room with a heart monitor, right? You can have a wave like this, you can have a wave like that, you can have other wavelengths within that energy field. So really, it comes into your frequency, your vibration, right? And as a universe, and this is where I started to work out, what does that mean? To me, it's a universal vibration. It's a universal vibration that is everything. And at the time of me being aware that I could be anything, anytime, any place, anywhere, that I was everything, every time, any place, anywhere. What does that mean? That means I am me, I am you, I am the sun, the sky, the earth, the moon, I am the table, the chairs, the food on the plate, yeah, the air that you breathe. And so are you. And once you understand, once you embed that into you, and it's not about necessarily understanding it, I think it's about living it and embodying it. You know, it really, for me, it really changed a lot of things in terms of how you see things, how you maybe relate to other people, and really about bringing barriers down.
Tell us how. How has it changed you?
I think that there's two sides of it. I think that there's, I think that part of it is just an intrinsic knowing. And I know you know this, right? You get this as much as me. And I think this is why we're brothers, right? I mean, there's just something there, you know, from the first moment we met, we get each other on that level, right? And that level is, you just, you know, when you find people on that level, there's just such a trust, you get it, you understand. When people aren't operating like that, that's when you get, you know, differences on either side. That's where you get conflicts, where you see people trying to play the game because they're not really, they don't really have other people's interests at heart, right? Because they're not thinking in a whole space. They're thinking in an isolated space. And I'm seeing it more and more weirdly. I thought, you know, there is a togetherness in one side, but there's a very big separation in the other side. That's one thing, but so there's an intrinsic nature, right? The other side of it, though, is that we all have conditioning from our upbringing, and there's a whole load of stuff around karma. You know, people talk about karma. I look at karma really as generationalized trauma, right? The one thing that traverses generations is trauma. And it is the effect of trauma on an individual and their reaction to trauma which gets passed along. Right? Now, that's particularly in poverty or war or stressful scenarios. And you can see it. You can see, you only have to look in your own family line, right? When you don't even realize that you may have traits of your mum and dad that come out 20 or 30 years later. But then you realize they're not the traits of your mum and dad, they're the traits of your grandparents, who actually could be your great-great-great-grandparents, right? And that has just gone through a whole lineage without even anybody realizing. So to me, what this journey also got me to understand, which is actually it's a daily journey, right? Which is understanding that, trying to catch it when you can, but also then trying to change and break that cycle of the trauma being taken forward. Now, you know, by trying to change that, you can change other things, but ultimately it's about even just trying, I think, and being aware of it enough to try. Because if you're trying to recognize that and change it for the better, then you can be more compassionate, you can give more space to other people that are doing it. And if you actually all come into a space on that basis, you've got much more flexibility to understand each other, to try and come up with solutions to effectively problems. And that's ultimately from a personal and a business perspective, that's the position I always take. So for me, it's two sides. One is a fully intrinsic, it's just changed a feeling in me. Two was, it helped me understand more and more about other people and myself, and then try and take steps towards, you know, changing that, or at least understanding it. And it's not an easy journey, but I think it's an important one. So for me, where did I get to that? So that's where, you know, we were talking about Yubra. Yubra is a word that I came up with, and I've used it a lot in healing practices, you know, bringing it into my head and my heart, and we can talk about some of that, because there is a way to heal some of this generational trauma, very much so in a spiritual way, right? And I think you can do a hell of a lot of good, and, you know, maybe mixing the two words, but a lot of good and a lot of focus on that. And Yubra is, for me, is Y-O-O, right? So Y-O-O is the phonetics of universal. And Bra is from vibration, Vibra, vibration. So you have a universal vibration. And to me, That's one thing that we can all connect to, and that's one thing that we all are. We might vibrate differently, but we're all a universal vibration, right? And that's our experience here. So to me, that started to really then take down barriers of religion, race, background. It doesn't really matter, right? It's you see it in people when you get them. It's all of those things fall away, they peel away when you recognize each other.
Okay, so now this gives birth to a lot of questions, of course.
Mm.
And, see, so you went through a phase where you had, to begin with, an out-of-body experience, which was probably a very different case altogether in comparison to the rest of the people in the group. Probably the other people did not actually go through the same experience that you did.
Yeah.
They might have had their own journey, but probably you didn't get to discuss with them, or even if you did, you found yourself to be different. So so that spiritual zone where you were among those very spiritual people, you experienced something which was extraordinary in many ways, and but very scientific in other ways as well, because it could scientifically be proven that it is possible that you go through such an experience. But then what happens after that is something very, very non-scientific and very, very spiritual, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, and then now that you the way you expressed it and the way you felt the conscious state of mind, I would not even call it mind, a conscious state of existence,
Yes.
which was more of a universal or metaversal sort of a concept, where you felt united and connected with this conscious state of being.
Yeah.
And since then, you look at things very differently from what you had earlier in your perspective, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, I'm amazed, and it's beautiful, and it's amazing, and there's a term in our Islamic side of there are two sides of Islamic beliefs. One is the very copybook, close, just like in Christianity, more like close to church. So in Islam, it's more like close to the madrasa or close to the book. And then there's a parallel side of Islam, which is the spiritual side, which we call Sufism. You know Sufism, the term.
Yeah.
That Sufism also talks about these things in a very similar way. There's a term in Sufism, it's called Wahdatul Wujud. What Wahdatul Wujud, Wahad means one, Wujud means existence. So Wahdatul Wujud means the collective singular existence of the conscious state of being. So this is why when you were telling me, I could relate to it. That okay.
Yeah, I've got you now. I got you.
Yeah,
and you do see this in many religions, and this is important, because I think that what's happening now is that science is starting to prove religion, but I think that religion gave science a direction. But the gray area is, if you have that knowledge, then you have the power, right? Because you understand the metaphysical workings of the universe, and us on it and it on us.
Exactly. And how to apply that even at times.
Absolutely, right? And this is where I think that we are in a period of time where the difference between that, those written text and let's say you get some ultra views on all of these things, right? We're actually, the real essence of all of these texts is that oneness, right? So anything that creates a separation, to me, is incongruent, right? Which means it doesn't jive, right? It's not in the same vibration of what the essence of these things are, the religion, right? So to me, that's where becomes my new foundational base, which is a really, to me, it enables me to be super open with people. Unfortunately, you know, like I said, trauma and other things, they're the cognitive elements which people haven't broken through yet, which are the patterns then that get repeated. And you can see it more and more and more in people now. And I think it's becoming a pandemic. Funny enough.
But see, where we go along together is that I also agree. I also believe, and just the way you said it, that the first time we met, we felt that we were connected. We could understand each other halfway through the sentence, and we could relate to so many things when we were in any sort of a conversation. That okay, I get you. I get the point. I get where you're coming from.
We also took a moral position. We both shared a moral, which was kind of do no harm and do good, right? And most important with that is don't take the mickey out of people. We're all here trying to do our best, right? Trying to live a life. So ultimately, it's, you know, can we help each other do better?
Yeah, but where does the purpose come in when we talk about universal vibrations? Where does two things? What you need to tell me, enlighten me with in this concept is we come to the my apologies.
I don't want to come on.
We come to the conscious state of mind or being.
Yeah.
Do you see a supernatural creator of this conscious state of being, or do you feel that it's the same being which is the conscious state of mind? Or and second question, if we, just like you said, we do have individualities as well in this oneness of the being. So these individualities, do you see a purpose for this, or is this an automatic system that self-created its external tentacles sort of a thing, and now they have a process of growing and fading away and regrowing and fading away? Or how do you see this?
There's some really, I think this is it's a very, very interesting area. I think it's a contentious area to a lot of people, because again, it comes into views and beliefs, some of it, right? So talking about OBEs, since then, you know, I've met good friends now that are very professional with their out-of-body experiences. You know, they've developed light machines to help, you know, get out of body easier. I met a guy, you know, years ago in France. We did a workshop with a guy that I know called Todd Akamesis, but there was a guy there called Tom Campbell, and he worked at the Monroe Institute in the States in the 60s. You know, and they did a lot of work in terms of developing out-of-body practices, and part of that was binaural beats. So binaural beats is a slightly different sequence in your ear, which vibrates in between the two hemispheres of your brain. You have a little plate, and vibrating that is effectively how they could see about getting out of body. So, but Tom Campbell has a very interesting thing, and he looks at it a bit like, he looks at it like a virtual reality, right? So this is his hypothesis and position, which says, okay, you know, if we are conscious in it and we're living in the conscious reality, right, we couldn't create it. We couldn't be the creators of what we're living in. You need a higher consciousness, right? So it's like the computer program couldn't build the computer. Yeah. So the operating system couldn't build the computer. I think that's a very interesting point. But it also comes, I think, lately to, you know, some of the conversations I've had about objective reality, understanding, okay, so yeah, this is a pen, right? And it isn't a Ferrari. Yeah. Now, it's a pen in a three-dimensional world. In the energy world, it's just particles, right? So actually, the energy that's in this is also in the Ferrari. So in that sense, it could be, right? Now, in this conscious experience that we're having, yes, this is a pen, right? Now it's a bit like when you go out of body journey. You know, people travel between, let's say, realities. In those realities, you might have a different consensus. So you might be able to fly. You know, like when you're in your dream state or what have you, you can feel yourself flying or what have you. There's lots of studies on that. We can't do it in this world. Although, you know, if you look at some of the Shaolin monks, for example, right, what they can do with practice defies logical understanding. Right. So, but where did I get to? This was a conversation I was having the other day, and it was, you've got objective reality, and then you've got consciousness, and there's a whole lot of stuff now around sort of the newer messaging, which is, you know, you can affect the world with your mindset. You know, if you think it's real, and if you can bring it to you, I believe that that's absolutely possible. You can't create something from nothing, right? But you can attract things to you. Whether or not it's you actually attracting it, or whether then you see more because you're open to it and you're changing it. But actually, if you look at it now, ultimately, if there is consciousness running through us, right? You can see it in the animal world. There's consciousness through animals. There's consciousness through plants, right? I've seen studies. There's a Japanese, he's dead now, physicist, I think he was, Dr. Mazuro Emoto. There's messages in water. So you look at the different, you know, he takes water from different parts of the world and freezes it. And then on the test tubes as well, he writes different things, like he could write love or hate. So he'll take two samples of water in the same place. One on it will write love, the other one it will write hate. And when he takes a cross section, you can see the difference in the frozen, the frozen particles of the ice, right? How it changes. Now you take that, we're 80% water. So, but to me, when I start to look at it, and you're seeing it in more studies that are coming through now, there is no separation, right? It's a Venn diagram. You can have these two opposing thoughts, but actually where we are is that bit that sits in the middle, where I believe, you know, consciousness is pervasive through everything. And you can see it, right? You can feel it. And I think that at some point in time, everybody now wants absolute proof in the, you know, over and above their own intrinsic feelings, yeah, their gut feelings. So they will let go of and we were having this conversation about things earlier, right? So they'd rather listen to a third party or a deity or something like that than they will listen to their own intrinsic feelings. And I think that if we could get to that, we would understand that, yes, it is running through it. What is it? It's about food. Why do people bless food? Why do they bless the water before they drink it? Because all this is going through a whole system, right? It's all part of one system. It, you know, to a lot of people, it sounds new age, or it's a movement from a spiritual practice over here to a new age practice, which is spiritual, not religious. I don't believe it really makes a difference. I think it's about the intent behind it, right? And once you boil down that intent, that breaks down barriers. So, you know, it doesn't really matter, because we can sit there and break bread together and bless it, because we understand I don't know if they're popping out, I'll try and mute that in a minute, but we understand the essence and the intent behind that blessing, rather than the words. The words and all of these things mean nothing. They carry energy, but it's the pure intent that comes from it. Let's see if I can,
yeah, but when you mention the intrinsic part of us, or all of us,
yeah,
and then of course there's an influence, a foreign influence of a deity through books, through prophets, and through preachers, through all
parents,
those external
parents, friends, everything.
Yes, so external influence, and just like you said, more than 70% of human body is water, and the effect that the Japanese person that you mentioned also practically saw that there are effects of any external influence on this water-made body. And do you think that when the intrinsic feeling of a person does not coincide with the external influence of any religion, faith, or belief, if when they do not coincide, is there a clash of the vibrations, some sort of a contradictory arrangement in the waves that are generated?
Yeah, 100%. But I think it's more than that. That is exactly what happens right now. This goes through waves in our life. So you get to a point, you can feel this energy building up to the sort of, it's a bit like a spot, right? So you get a build up of a spot, you squeeze it, it goes away, you might have another one come up somewhere else, right? Now, for me, over the years, what I've learned is when my stress goes up and I'm starting to feel this anxiety, it's typically a change in energy. There's a change in frequency. You know, the moons are very powerful with that. I'm not sure if you feel it, but I can be very susceptible to the moons and feel that, you could be up till 2 or 3 in the morning. You're probably riding them as well, right? You know exactly what I mean. Yeah. Sometimes you have to go with the flow of these things because it is a flow, right? And a flow like that is a wave of energy. So you have to recognize the peaks and the troughs. And it's hard sometimes to get in that space because there are other influences and you're dealing with other people's energy and things like that. But I've noticed it in myself, and there's a number of practices that I can do in healing, and I'll talk about them in a bit. But there's one that I make like a colander, right? So like a colander when you wash your vegetables and you've got all the holes in it. So if you imagine your energy field, there's a very simple way to explain the feeling. So when you get 2 magnets, yeah, and magnets will either attract themselves to each other, or if you turn them around, they'll repel themselves. When you feel that repulsion, if you take your consciousness and you can feel your energy field, right, especially when you're in these stress points, you can typically feel that repulsion at the edge of your energy, right? Now, that's really important because ultimately it's about new, fresh energy trying to come in and your old stale energy not clearing itself out. So you can either try and process that or let it go. And it's constant build-up. We're building things up, it's building up, and we have to keep shipping it out. And I think that actually I'm seeing it I feel it in myself. I see it more maybe in some of the Western cultures, but I think, regular prayer, regular meditation and things like that definitely helps with that, because you're naturally moving it through. That brings a calmness. And that calmness is weirdly also what creates repulsion in people that can't deal with the calmness, right? So you probably maybe feel it, right? But if with a lot of meditation and prayer and things like that, you can have that inner calm, right? Because you haven't got that build-up. You can see how other people really then, in a particular sense, cannot deal with people that are ultra calm because they don't understand how they can get to that point. And this is about the energy. This is about the vibration and the frequency. And what we have to realize is, we are living in an energy field all the time. Everything from phones to computers to the moon to the sun to all the planets, they have an effect that we don't know and we don't realize as much as our forefathers, our ancient forefathers that clearly had much more capabilities than us. If you look around the world, look at you only have to look into, megalithic structures and know that they had more of an understanding of the influence of planets and universal energy on us than we do right now. So to me, yes, this energy buildup is really important. Clearing it out and being aware of it, because that's what creates frustration. That's what creates blood pressure, heart palpitations, all these things. So I think it's really important.
So now let's come to the second part, because so far I think we are pretty much coinciding in terms of how we look at things. Now, one thing is left, the second part of the question. So what do you think is the purpose, and what do you think gives every single entity a purpose of being in this energy field?
That's a good point, because I think that purpose is a hard one, and I think a lot of people struggle with purpose. And ultimately, if you really take everybody at their core, what do they want, right? They just want to chill out, relax, have fun, spend some time with their loved ones, whatever it might be. Yeah, that's, and I don't think that's a bad purpose, right? We have been, I think that and again, this is the energy, right? That's probably our core. What we have been corralled into over generations, and this comes into a lot of slavery and a lot of other bits and pieces, is that just doesn't jive with what we're trying to do, right? This whole, you've got to work, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to, be good to your neighbor, you've got to volunteer, you've got to do all these things. Should they be needed? Should we be able to live in a better society? What our core purpose of life, I think, is if we could all get to that point, then, we can live in bliss. And this to me is ultimately, I'm trying to reconcile it, going, right, in my head, you've got to go and earn money and do these things, right? And I want to do that with purpose. I'm not seeing those purposeful jobs necessarily bringing the rewards, financial rewards, that you actually need to live in the world. So, there's certain elements of that, which is taking people away from it. And then the mindset in the capital and commercial and the corporate world really is taking people away from, I think, their center. And the center is about, we need to do things. People need to be busy anyway, but everybody has some different elements. But ultimately, I think that purpose is a relaxation, to getting to that point of almost a neutrality. And at that point, then we can be anything, do anything, enjoy things, right? And so I think purpose is a hard one, because I think that a lot of people are trying to fit purpose to a world that isn't real. It's artificially created. The narrative around the world that we live in is artificially created.
I get that part. So this is artificially created. I believe so too. I believe this is all more of an illusion, which you woke up to when you were having that OBE. I woke up to when I had my kind of an OBE somewhere down the lane.
Yeah.
Now, but what happened to me was, or what happened to you also, is that you went through a moment of realization. You realized something, which was probably something you would never have realized otherwise. And since you were born in a religious family, a believer's family, and hence you had a natural...
no, they were non-religious, really, although I got baptized.
Yes, non-religious, but believer family. A concept of a deity did exist in the household, and they did believe that, okay, there is some sort of a creator. And so that probably inculcated some sort of a natural proclivity of yours to think on these spiritual lines also, to give them room at least to think about these things. And when you had that experience, you went through a moment of realization, and now I agree. I am 100% with you in this. And then the whole collective one conscious state of being, I also agree with that. But there has to be a drive. There has to be, I'm not talking about altruism in a way that I give up everything for the others. I sacrifice everything for others. Okay, that could be one way of achieving some purpose. That could be one pathway of building causes for me to reach to a purpose. But what would be the drive other than being with the loved ones, living a good life, and these sort of things? What could be, in your point of view, what could be a greater purpose that could be larger than life, or that could be something worth dying for, or something worth trying for? Do you think every person?
Okay. I think that there's a difference between the conscious and the unconscious. Okay, and it comes back to trauma, I think, and as a purpose, you know, whether this crosses all religions, right, and beliefs, do no harm, right, and partly do no harm is also trying not to pass down that trauma, that karma, that whatever it is that is that lineage. If you can stop that, and you can, you can live in a way that you're not necessarily, and it's very hard to do, right? There's always times when you get out of yourself or what have you, but if you can actively try and stop taking that forward, then I think that for the next generation and the next generation, hopefully, they can get closer to that oneness. Whether or not it's achievable in our lifetime, one would hope so. I believe that, to me, all of this is, what do they say? What does it take? For me, it takes nothing more than a shift in consciousness, right? And a shift in consciousness, as you and I both know, can happen instantaneously, right? So, but if you haven't got that shift in consciousness, it's a bit like, so this purpose, if you, for me, that's a core purpose, right? There are other things which become, I think for me, once I look at that, the other things become more frivolous, right? That becomes a purpose because I understand the hurt and the damage that those things that people aren't aware of can do. Even myself, I'm I'm aware of it, but it doesn't necessarily stop me from doing it in certain situations. Having said that, I can apologize, I can make amends, I can also forgive in very different ways. So I think for me, that's an important purpose. And my likening it is to maybe like a sports person. So you see it in sport, right? You've either got somebody who has a natural ability, and they just get it, right? And we all know those sort of people. But then there's the others, which are if you look at it in soccer or what have you, you've got a few with natural ability. The rest of it, they work at it day in, day out. They work at their practice. They practice, and they become professional at it. And I think this is really important. It's about not taking forward those things that have unconsciously, been put onto us.
Okay. Now, what if I give you another supposition?
Yeah, go for it. I'm open to all of this because I absorbing it all as a sponge, right?
Yeah. See, I agree to everything that you're saying. Amazingly, I think you're speaking my language. You're just putting it in another way, a different perspective to exactly what I believe in, what I have learned to believe in over the past few years now.
And that's important, right? It's also what you're saying there is you had a moment, and then it's about your learning, because that triggered something in you to open up and expand and to try and make sense of it.
Exactly.
That's key. It's the learning, it's the effort.
Yes, and that bump in the road is something that happened to me many years ago because I have a disease, a disease that traveled from my father to me. It's called cluster headache.
Migraines, yeah?
Yeah. It comes in clusters, 30, 40 attacks in a day. So I get morphine shots and all these sort of crazy, very crazy medication IVs for 2-3 months. And every year it seems like, okay, that's the last time that's the end of the world for me, end of the road. So I know it's going to happen anytime during these attacks, but somehow I come back every time, which is no coincidence to me. And there were a few times when I felt that something has happened, something special has happened. But I didn't want to believe it. Why? Because the world would not let me believe it. I would see the world differently. And you know, Nick, when I say this, I know you would get it 100% that every day since then, when I wake up, I look at this world and it seems like it's upside down, or
Mm.
it's on another angle, in another dimension. I don't live, I don't exist the way they exist. This world exists.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that I could not be the only person, just like I'm not in this case, in this conversation. We're two people who went through this experience. And we too could not be the only two people in the world, or in this time zone, or in this era. So it means these sort of things have happened before, many times, many centuries ago, and probably every year, every century, in every part of the world, wherever. Now, just like I would say mankind, from the very advent of mankind to now, has collectively achieved certain things towards the end of times, according to the books and beliefs. I agree. Okay, this system had a beginning, so it must have an end at
Mm.
some point of time. So before the end, mankind, or this organism that we term as uh, the conscious state of existence in this realm,
Yep.
is going towards the end, but has achieved a lot in understanding and comprehending the very existence and the very start of this whole charade that we call life on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Now, but among these people, there are also people like us who have been experiencing certain things which differ them from the others, which kind of differentiates them in a spiritual side. And I believe people before us, or people after us, in the present and past uh, and future state of time, have to some level acquired some sort of a purpose, I believe, some sort of purpose which made them realize that these experiences were no coincidences. These experiences were supposed to take them to a level where they would first, in the first instance, notice that, okay, this is how it is. This is how the system works. Now you realize this. Now we're sending you back, or now I am sending myself back, so that I realize plenty of things that I could not have realized otherwise. Before this bump, I was a nobody, and now I am everybody, or I am everything, or I am everywhere, right? So now what I'm supposed to do is, before the end of the end of the rope, I have to somehow do something. It could be uh, some humanitarian act. It could be some uh, Nobel Prize. It could be an Oscar. It could be a Grammy. Whatever I want to build within my own frame of mind at that time,
Yeah.
and then build on it. But then what I've realized, that all those people who have achieved these sort of distinctions so far end up saying that this was just a milestone.
Yeah.
Man is supposed to do more. And then I'm like, okay, now I got to research more and find out people who did more than just a Nobel Prize, or more than just a couple of Oscars, right? So then I realized, okay, then there were some saints or some prophets, and so or these sort of people who felt as if these worldly material goals are not what you're here for, or maybe you are here for them. Some people are here for them, but they were there for probably a greater cause. And I'm like, okay, now how do I come up with a greater cause? Because they've done all, have you seen the Truman Show?
Yeah. Yeah.
Jim Carrey? When he tries to explore about the world, that the teacher says, oh no, the world has already been explored, so there's no need to so that we would not come out of the Truman Show.
I agree with you. I mean, and it's, I think there's an interesting bit you said in there, right? So and this is, I think, is a balance between the conscious and the unconscious, right? Consciously, for example, you and I, right? are trying to find something which excites us, that does good, right? And almost won't be satisfied until we find that. But actually, everything we do anyway has that radiating through it, right? Whereas, again, it comes back to the trying and wanting to, right? And it's almost sometimes I think you can overdo that. It's you're forcing it, so it's like an energy thing. Again, it's the desperation. You want it so much, you're almost pushing it away. Whereas then you see others that are going, they're just effortless, right? Because they're not even thinking about it, whether or not. But most of them, when you really look at them, it didn't start on that journey, the conscious level, right? They've had experiences through that journey, and then that's given them a different perspective at the end. So, there's a saying, isn't it? It's like it's the journey, not the destination, right? And I look at it in business, right? Just in business, I think, okay, there's been lots of, just over the last few years, I've been doing lots of stuff. I look at this whole crypto market now, right? I've talked about that for many times. I've got to be one of the few people that hasn't made a bloody penny in it, even though I've been there right from the start. Why? Because I put a moral compass on it, right? My moral compass is wanting to use technology to do something good. And kind of, it's a weird one, because I think that drive to doing something, it will come and it's there. I think it's just, again, doing these things, sometimes you can do some things on your own, but it just isn't as much fun, right? There's a real, it's really nice when you have people around you that you can actually relax with. I've made, like you, right? You can make mistakes in business where you relax and you trust other people because you believe they've got the same moral compass as you, and then you're on the losing side of it. So, but at the same time, I think, just looking at that, and I use business as an example because I think it's good, right? Is that there, but for the grace of God go I. So yes, I could have, you could have been an expert in one field, but actually you're never going to be that. A lot of people talk about saying you've got to be an expert in one field, not a jack of all trades, or or what have you. But actually, there's not many people that can take that view, that 1,000-foot view, and look at these things. And I don't think that gets valued enough, because it's really important. So, for me, going into some of these areas, intrinsically, do I need to know the absolute detail and the nuts and bolts of absolutely everything? No. I can absorb that. It's probably a bit like reading a book. Like, imagine like reading poetry or whatever. You think about the amount of books you can almost absorb. The knowledge that you have the ability to absorb and process through is far different to everybody else, because you're not so worried about the minutiae in it. It's more about the general energy around it. So I think that there's in terms of our purpose, that underlying purpose that is there, the purpose of what's that spot? What are we going to do? What's that bit? I think it's everything. It's even like having these conversations, and a conversation to a point where you're not trying, we're not trying to make something out of it, of, building a huge profile or brand or whatever, because ultimately, when you see a lot of those now, they start off on the right journey and then they get corrupted. So I think part of that is about, having faith that the journey that we've been on, and we are on all the time, all of us, right? You have to have the faith that it is for a reason, it is for a purpose. And sometimes we don't have the awareness of that until after the fact, right? And that's where faith really comes in. It's challenging. Faith gets challenged day in, day out, and it's personal faith.
Do you think it's important to identify the purpose before it's too late for you to achieve?
No, because I think that it's the underlying intent. If you travel through it with the underlying intent, right, then by nature of it, whenever you connect with another human, without even knowing it, you're spreading it, right? You're opening up people to thoughts.
Nick, you talk like Muslims.
I'm a brother from another mother.
No, I'll tell you why. I normally tend to comply with a system of belief, but I somehow come out different from the contemporary Muslims. This is why I have people have so many pejoratives for me these days, and I don't even know why they give me these sort of derogatory pejoratives for reasons. Why? Because they think I do not coincide with the prevalent thought of a Muslim, a typical Muslim. But you are talking like a Muslim. Why? Because the underlying intent that you talk about is the first and the foremost core of the belief of the Islamic system of life, is that your intent is what takes you anywhere, be it right or wrong, good or not, heaven or hell, towards God or towards salvation or not. It's the intent. I agree. To this level, I agree that Muslims and all the believers of one God or of a deity, they all say pretty much the same thing, but Muslims emphasize on the intent. But where I differ from them is that I agree that the underlying intent has to be there, but I feel there's something missing. Even if I have the purest of intent, what
Yeah.
me stand out from the crowd is not my intent. It's my journey. Just like you mentioned, that it's the journey that matters, not the destination or not what you achieve. And B is the source of inspiration, meaning what is my intent inspired by or aspiring to be, and what is the gap between the source of inspiration to the goal of aspiration?
Yep.
What and how do I bridge this gap is what is how I practice my belief, whatever belief that may be. If my practice is not coinciding, I would never be able to bridge this gap. Yes, I would have the intent. I would say I have the intent. I would claim I have the intent. And I'm sure if there's an afterlife, they would see that intent way better than I would ever do.
Yeah,
But
because it resonates, right? That's a frequency.
yeah, exactly. But it's just like you said, this wave of inspiration has to somewhere coincide with this wave of aspiration. And I believe I am just in the process, in the journey of connecting these two by means of my intent. Yes, agreed. But there's a certain amount of practice that I have to add, and maybe that is the missing ingredient. Now, that practice is what I believe is missing in my part, in a sense that my purpose is identified. I have a purpose in my head, but that purpose is miles away from me, while my time is probably just a few kilometers left, right?
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the linear side. And now, now, so this is the dilemma that I have.
Well, it comes
And
back, but there was something that we were talking about just prior to that. Now, this was where, if you then think about, it's interesting, right? Facebook just came out with a metaverse. Yeah. So we're talking about earlier about living in a metaverse, right? And science effectively, that's spirituality, metaverse. Science is about proving that. When you break that down, and we're talking about energy and frequency, what do they say? There's one universal language, and that's mathematics. Okay. So when you look at a multiverse, what are they? They are probable realities. I look at something called a probable reality, right? So, if you're walking down the street and you take a left turning, then there is an equal energy around there. There's a right turning, right? So we have a choice at that point. Now, they both exist. So if you have all these things, and there's a lot of science around this, because actually when you get into it, it's about holograms. So I believe we have almost like a holographic universe. I remember reading something years ago, which was, if you take a picture, like a holographic picture on a plate, like a little mirror or whatever, right? And you drop it, it smashes on the floor. You haven't got pieces of a picture like you would of a painting, right? each individual shard holds the whole image, right? Now, if you can do that, what's the purpose actually in deep in meditation as well is, can I bring through the knowledge of all of my probable realities and then utilize that and heal and work with it? So ultimately, when you come into embodying this, and I'm sure you do it anyway, right? It's about really trying to touch all of these elements. It's hard to really explain because it is quite metaphysical. And when you go into it, it's like, okay, what do I want to bring through? I don't even know. So actually, if I don't know what I need, what's the best way I can put a wrapper around that, which gives it some definition, does no harm. And that's where language is really important as well. And then actually, if you study the language, I mean, you study language, right? You understand the power of word. And you can see it in the world right now in terms of, and this comes back into even to things like pagans, right? So pagans talk about spells, how you use words and bring them together. And I know we're sort of jumping around, but to me, it's if you can bring that through, what I've had crises of faith, right? Because there's certain bits when things aren't working, it's that trust. Have I done right? Is it meant to be? Should I have gone down that journey? And am I gauging what I should have done by what is most other people would do or would expect? Not of me, but of themselves, right? Because I expect something very different from me. I don't even think on those levels before. I mean, there's just, I can't even get my head into it, right? So, but ultimately, I think that we're kind of, at the moment, I feel like we're going through a squeeze. And there's been a lot, there's a lot of stuff, the whole spiritual world, there's this whole, we're talking about two, ultimately, we're the same beings occupying a very different world, even though we're on the same planet, right? And there's a whole load of stuff that's talked about the 3-dimensional to the 5th-dimensional, all this sort of stuff. But you can see it in people's energy, the vibration is changing, is shifting. And this also is in your DNA, right? Now, there's a lot going on in the world, how you can manipulate that. I think that we're in very dangerous times, which is why I become more maybe vociferous about some of these things, specifically now, right? If people are injected with God knows what, right? That the ability for that just to change the frequency and the connection between humans, right? And the way you control people is through divide and conquer. And ultimately, we have an intrinsic energy that connects us all. If you start interfering with that and breaking it down, you separate it. So to me, and there's a bit which I remember, right? Now, the saying, fake it till you make it, right? So that sense of purpose and feeling like it hasn't landed yet, right? It shakes your faith to the core. But ultimately, you can never lose that faith. You can only have more and more stuff layered on it, right? And all of the work we've done is about taking off those layers. So at the moment, it feels like you're trying to take off all these layers as quickly as they're going on. And that's where I feel this energy. And when I get to that, that's when I feel that energy vibration at the edges. It might not help me deal with it in many ways, right? And because we live in a world that requires money, and probably fundamentally, you and I have zero value of money, realistically, right? It doesn't mean anything. We operate on a different frequency, different energy. We're transacting it's a multifaceted way. And actually, even if you look at money, it's a one-dimensional way for us to interact as human beings, right? And exchange value, which doesn't work, and it's clear. But that faith, I believe that actually, if you look at what we are now, we're coming into our time. There's more and more of this needed because there are a lot of charlatans. Yeah. What do they say? Beware the false messiah. Right. And you see it a lot, like me. There's a lot of people talking it. They don't embody it. And actually, in a weird way, I see this more and more in the healing sector. A lot of people go into healing because they need healing themselves. And actually, if you've got somebody who hasn't dealt with the basics of their own healing, and then they're trying to heal other people, actually they're re-energizing people to their frequency as much as anything. So coming back to purpose, and there's a long way around it, faith. And it's like a vaccine, it's been waning hard, right? But I think that my faith, my belief is that, keep going, it's the journey. And with the right intent, we attract the right people and the opportunities. And it is a matter of just sometimes being able to ride out those waves. And so that's where I think in purpose, that's why intent is really important, because the intent with faith keeps you on your journey.
Okay. On that note for tonight, I think we should end on this beautiful note, and we will continue from here. And in our next episode, we will also take some questions from our audience.
There's a few messages in the chat, so I'm happy. I've loved this. There's very few people in the world that you can have a good, open, honest, and we can go in all directions, right? So we're happy to take questions, talk about stuff, and the beauty is, I think we're both very much open to learning. Everything that comes out, we're learning as we're saying it, right? These things can rattle around your head, right? You can get it out in word. I mean, I've got reams of paper, really, that I should, different things. And I think this is that coalescence now.
100%. See, the whole purpose of creating this platform, the Grey Lounge, is to learn from each other, to discuss these possibilities and learn from each other's journey. Because the beauty of this, that we all the world actually believes in and agrees with, is the different journeys that we are bringing towards each other and from each other. And if we do not benefit from that and create some sort of borders and walls and boundaries, I think we're on the losing end, nobody else. So
100%. This is why you need that safe space.
Yes. So at Grey Lounge, we go through these filters and borders and boundaries and reach out to like minds, and the concept of freedom of thought is exactly what we did tonight. Yes. And that we expressed our thoughts with freedom. We talked about it, and I believe we coincided everywhere, wherever we went to, and that's the beauty of it. So we will continue.
My friend, always there, right?
Yeah. So we will continue from here, and in the next episode, we will continue and take some more questions and elaborate further on your experiences, and particularly your journey, because it is very interesting for me, and I'm pretty sure it's very interesting for anybody who gets to hear that. So I thank you very much for your time, and also I thank the participants who were in our Zoom session, and those who would view this later on our YouTube channel. I thank you, and that you can have your ending note. I have a habit of giving the ending note to the esteemed guests that we have.
Fair enough, right? So I would like to just, first of all, thank everybody who's shown up today, and I'm sure there'll be many more that show up, and welcome to the discussion, welcome to the debate. There's no prejudice here, as hopefully everybody understands. It doesn't matter where you're from, what your beliefs are, as long as you can come into this space and park that at the door and come in with honesty, then that's all that matters. And Zubi, I thank you for that. I know it's been a long time coming, but some things are worth waiting for.
this for sure was.
So thank you, my friend. Next time.
Good night. Take care.
Bye, buddy.